When it comes to reading the Bible in English, what's a good translation to use? Here's a few tips in this episode of the Accessible Faith Project. Hi there, I'm John, and welcome to the Accessible Faith Project. If you're looking for insights into the Bible, faith and history in ways that engage your brain regardless of your faith stance, then please hit subscribe and that little bell icon so you can be notified anytime I upload a new video. The Bible as a whole was originally written in ancient Hebrew, 1st century Common Greek, and a handful of passages in Aramaic, which is closely related to Hebrew. It means that any version of English you read it in, no matter how old, you are reading a translation. So it's helpful to put some thought into choosing a translation, because that choice will influence your understanding of what you read. Also, not all translations are created equal, because each has its own character and flavor that reflects the translator or the team of translators who worked on it. Today, there are over 50 different translations of the Bible in English alone. Now, I need to make a very important disclaimer here. I'm talking about translations of the Bible here, not the various editions and packaging of a given Bible translation. For example, do a search on Teen Study Bible or Devotional Bible on Amazon, and there's a very good chance that while each of them may look different and have different commentary bits in them, they're all the same translation. I would also call these editions instead. And for the record, there is not a translation out there so far that is called the Study Bible. You need to look past the splash cover and pay attention to the title of the translation. Most of the time, you can tell a translation by a 3 or 4 letter designation that is a short form of the full description of the translation. KJV, for example, is short for the King James Version. NRSV is short for the New Revised Standard Version, and CEB is short for the Common English Bible. These are the letters one needs to pay attention to when choosing a Bible, rather than a flashy title. As the saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover. Some of these editions are very helpful, but that's worth another video all on its own. For the moment, we are just dealing purely with the translation, the effort of bringing 3 ancient languages forward into English. And so while I have my own preference for the Bible translations that I reach for, I'm going to give you 4 touchstones that I use when deciding which ones I'm going to use. And these are the 4 A's: availability, accessibility, accuracy, and agenda. Availability. This might be a silly point to make, but the simple point of availability of a given translation often governs what version of the Bible you may be able to read. Much of the time, if you go into a Chapters, Indigo, or a Barnes & Noble, most of the time there's just a handful of different translations that you're going to find. Online resources, including Amazon, allow more options, and Bible societies in different countries can also provide a greater breadth of biblical translations. If you're still trying to decide on a translation that might suit you, online Bible resources, especially Bible Gateway, can give you some easily accessed online references when you can quickly compare the same passage across different translations. Once you decide on a translation, deciding on other things like leather-bound or study Bibles or any other type of criteria then can come into play. My second point is accessibility. How easy is this translation to read? The first official English translation of the Bible is still one of the most widely read, and yet it is by far the most difficult to read. The King James Version was published in 1611, authorized by King James I of Great Britain, who it is named after. It was translated from one of the original languages into what we sometimes describe as Shakespearean language, and yet this was right in the middle of the playwright's career. And while it is some of the most widely read English translations, it is very difficult to read. It is estimated that one needs to be at least able to read at an undergraduate level in order to understand it well. On the other hand, there are translations out there that go out of their way to be readable. The contemporary English version sought to present the language at a 4th grade reading level, and there are a few other translations that seek to do the same. Some of these are more paraphrases that sacrifice accuracy for readability, but translators have been working at ways to remain both accurate and accessible. And that comes to my next point, accuracy. No translation that is out there is 100% accurate to the original language. It's virtually impossible. For example, when I was in seminary taking Hebrew, I was given a short passage to translate from 1 Samuel. I translated it and came out one way, and that was easy enough. However, when I was doing so, I noticed that a few of the words could be translated anywhere from 2 to 7 different ways, and some of these were semantics, but others could shift the meaning significantly. So maybe it was for extra credit, but I went back and translated the passage again, and then a third time, and I brought all three to my Hebrew professor and asked him which of these translations I had made was the right one. And what was his response? Yes. In other words, this one sentence in Hebrew could be translated into 3 or more different ways into English and still embody the meaning of all 3. And that blew me away, and it gave me a new appreciation for the challenge of accuracy, but also that it's helpful to read more than one translation for this very reason. The best of the translations that are aiming for accuracy will often note different nuances and meanings throughout footnotes. It's often helpful to pay attention to these. The more footnotes that a translation has, you know that this one was done with an effort to keep it accurate. Also, while I don't have time to go into it here, I have a little accuracy test of my own that I may share with you in a later video. There are some translations that sacrifice accuracy, often for readability, but others that sacrifice is made because of the agenda of the translation. This isn't as sinister as it sounds, but it does have some important implications. Given that there are over 50 different translations of the Bible in English, all of them, without exception, have a reason for why they exist. And this is what I am referring to as the agenda of translation. The American Standard Version, for example, sought to update the language of the King James Version to something that was more current to its time at the turn of the 20th century. In turn, the Revised Standard Version sought to do the same in 1952, and the New Revised Standard in 1988, all seeking to provide translations that were accurate, but also taking into account how English had changed over a period of 90 years. And this history is a bit simplified, but hopefully it gives you an idea. The story of how the King James Version of the Bible came to be is worth a video and a series of videos in and of itself. As all translations have an agenda for why they exist, it is worthwhile to do a little digging into it. A lot of the time, any modern translation will pretty much tell you up front its agenda because it is printed in the preamble before you even get into the main text itself. However, in addition to that, paying attention to the language in the preamble can also reveal a lot about how a given version's translation team approached their task. As an example, if a translation uses the term God's Word rather than simply using the term Bible, that can reveal a lot about the biases that are at play. So at the end of all this, I still haven't really answered the question, but rather provided you with some tools to help you make an informed choice. For the record, when I was at seminary, I personally used and still use the New Revised Standard Version. But lately, I have been making more use of the Contemporary English Version if working with children, or with the Common English Bible to give a different spin on things because it uses some different turns of phrases. And while I choose to use these translations based on the touchstones I outlined in this video, it is by no means definitive. The effort of comparing translations is definitely worthwhile, and I hope that this gives you somewhere to start. So what of this was new to you? What other questions does it raise? Let me know in the comments section down below. So if you want to explore this in ways that will expand your horizons and deepen your understanding, then come and join us on this journey by clicking on subscribe and that little bell icon, and you're all set to go. And I'll see you next time on the Accessible Faith Project.